Before I introduce our next speaker, SVLG has graciously offered me a few minutes to talk about sustainability at Western Digital. If I were in your shoes, however, I would be fighting a natural inclination to tune out anything that sounded like a laundry list of achievements, or worse yet, a sales pitch to fellow salespeople. What might pique my interest, on the other hand, would be some brief insight into why and how Western Digital has invested in sustainability, even in times of economic uncertainty, because I might find some examples that could apply to my company, or at least find some encouragement and a reminder that we are all in this together. So why do we invest in sustainability at Western Digital? Yes, it is personally satisfying. Yes, it feels like the right thing to do. And yes, it makes our PR team very happy. But the primary reason that we've been able to make sustainability a growing focus at our company is that we believe it will drive long-term corporate value. I do believe, as I discussed this morning, that the rumors of the death of ESG have been greatly exaggerated. There are, I think, truly a million wrong ways to run a sustainability program, and some companies have been finding those ways. But in the not-so-new reality we find ourselves in, a methodical, data-driven approach to sustainability reduces regulatory risks. It creates marketable product value. It attracts and retains employees, and it can even attract new investors. With those dynamics, even companies that are laser-focused on shareholder returns will find compelling reasons, like Western Digital has, to commit to net zero in our operations by 2032, and to run on 100% renewable energy and reduce our water withdrawals by 20% by 2030. But those commitments and the claims that follow them will tumble like a house of cards if not built on meticulous data integrity. As frightening as new regulation can be, it may curb the Wild West mentality that has led some to make claims and commitments that can't withstand scrutiny or time. So to any of you struggling to build consensus around sustainability, my advice is to live by your materiality assessments and to obsess about your data integrity. Those two foundational pillars have developed a deep-seated credibility that has completely reshaped sustainability at Western Digital, leading to progress and commitments that I wouldn't have thought possible even a few years ago. Doing right by the planet and our communities is certainly worth that effort. Now, I'd like to turn the stage over to a true pioneer in the nexus of innovation and environment. Michael Regan has served as the 16th Administrator of the United States Environmental Protection Agency since March 2021. He is the first black man and second person of color to lead the US EPA. Prior to his nomination as EPA Administrator, Administrator Regan served as the Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, as an executive at the Environmental Defense Fund, and actually started his career at the EPA decades ago. Throughout his career, he has been guided by a belief in forming consensus, fostering an open dialogue rooted in respect for science and the law, and an understanding that environmental protection and economic prosperity go hand in hand. He'll be in conversation with SVLG CEO Ahmad Thomas, and I look forward to an enlightening hour of conversation. Please join me in welcoming Administrator Regan and Ahmad Thomas to the stage.
Thank you. It is great to see you, Administrator. I have to apologize for having to follow the Secretary. That is tough duty.
Oh,
so
gosh.
You've already stepped up with a very high bar, but we are thrilled to have you back in California and so truly honored that you join us here today.
Well, thank you for having me. I hate following Jennifer as well, but you know, I think if we could plug Jennifer into our grid, we'd have all the power we need.
We solve everything. So we're going to talk about innovation, we're going to talk about investment, and this nexus of economic impact. For those in the audience, we have about 45 minutes of Q&A here one-on-one, about 15 minutes for your questions. So get it in on the app, and I'll get to as many questions as we can. And I'll start with the same theme as the Secretary on investment. Right, you've got a $100 billion plus between Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law. Can you talk about where your priorities are around investment and deploying those funds?
Well, first of all, I have to say I'm thankful for President Biden's leadership, because at EPA, most people don't like to see us coming. You know, the regulator isn't the most popular, but he's giving me some walking around money.
Sure.
100
Walking around money.
Walking around money.
Okay.
And you know, it really does span our mission. $50 billion of that is focused on shoring up our crumbling water infrastructure and wastewater infrastructure, pulling out every single lead line in this country. Over 9 million people, families, are exposed to lead in their drinking water. $5 billion to electrify our yellow school buses. Think about it. The transportation that takes our most precious cargo to school. $5 billion. We want to electrify our yellow school buses. I'll tell you, I was in Alma, Kansas, not too long ago. Population of less than 5,000 people. 9-year-old named Brant introduced me and talked about asthma and the importance of riding an electric school bus. But just as giddy was the Rural Electric Cooperative and the municipality, because while Brant's in school, they're going to plug that bus into the grid and smooth out that load, save their customers some money. $27 billion in a greenhouse gas reduction fund where we can really think about how nonprofits and cities and the private sector can help us bring capital off the sidelines and invest in carbon reduction strategies. Something that's really near and dear to my heart, $3 billion, billion with a B, to focus on environmental justice and equity, really going to those communities that need these resources the most, these frontline communities, and they're going to compete for grants that will let them use local solutions to combat pollution and climate change. Those are the priorities, and they span public health, transportation, the power sector, climate change. It's a really, really rich time to be at EPA.
And a busy time for you, and your leadership is appreciated right now. And I'll double click on a few of those, but we'll start with the greenhouse gas reduction fund, the $27 billion. And maybe the question is at a high level when we're talking about leveraging public and private investment. Where are those opportunities for success? Can you speak to where you see, especially for our leaders in the room, the opportunities to leverage public investment with private spend?
It's $27 billion. It sounds like a lot of money until you really wrap your head around we're trying to solve an over $2 trillion problem.
Right.
So the public-private partnership piece is a necessity. 20 billion of that, really proud to say that we're going to design programs where we work with nonprofits, where we work with those who are more experienced in handling and investing resources, where we work with some of these cities who are on the front lines who've already been thinking about how to invest. We're going to create competitions and grants so that $20 billion can be invested in the most strategic places in the most strategic ways by people who are experts at handling capital. $7 billion, you're looking at rooftop solar for blue collar and average families all across this country so that they can participate in the clean energy revolution. And so, I think what I'm proud of is we're taking these resources and we're playing the appropriate role of government, which is we are setting the rules of the game, but we're setting those rules in a way that those who are embedded in investment and technology can play, innovate, and be entrepreneurial to make this money go as far as it should go.
When you talk to the president and leaders in Congress, I'm curious that leverage component, is that understood, the power that you have when you can take, I mentioned with the Secretary, the Applied Materials investment, $4 billion, which is leveraged with CHIPS funds and state funds. But I think that multiplier effect is significant. Oh. And I don't think we've seen the level of focus around the multiplier effect in public-private partnerships from previous administrations.
You haven't. This is historic. We're living in historic times. I think this is the wisdom of President Biden. When he ran for the presidency, he said that he'd be a president to every single person in this country, that he'd combat the climate crisis head on. But he was very, very clear about being bipartisan and focusing on the power of government and the private sector. All of this is coming to fruition, and I think the fun part about my job is the regulator typically doesn't participate in the grant and awards game. Mm-hmm. We are typically just setting the rules of engagement and then sort of backing off. We have the opportunity to set those rules of engagement up, leveraging technology and innovation and the like, and then putting our money where our mouths are as we design these programs to use this $27 billion. we're going to try to push that out to organizations that will align with those regulations so that we can combat the climate crisis, create jobs, and stay globally competitive. We want this country to remain in that globally competitive position.
Right.
And we believe that we can do that while we save our children and save the planet.
Well, on the topic of marginalized communities and equity, I want to make sure to double click on that, the Equity Action Plan. But maybe a personal question and then speaking to that. So you being in this role matters. You know, my uncle went to A&T, as we talked about. My mom was an RN. Dad, lifelong military, Vietnam vet, you know, very similar to you.
Yes.
But to see you, an HBCU grad, for my sons to see you in this role, it matters, right? And speaks to us. How does that hit you? You know, how do you manage through all of that? Maybe it's the personal question. And then the Equity Action Plan is obviously what you're implementing. I'd love you to speak to that. But I don't want to dismiss the personal component. Yeah. And again, I'm truly grateful for your leadership.
Well, thank you for that. And I'll tell you, it's humbling. There's not a day that I don't walk into the office and forget that. I'm very mindful of that. And I'm a person of faith, and I think that I'm blessed. God has provided me with this opportunity to do something that's bigger than just me. And so as I travel the country, I see how people from all walks of life look at me differently. And it's an honor.
Because of the role.
Because of the role. Because the first black man to lead the EPA, a lot of people would, you know, lead folks to believe that African Americans and minorities are not interested in the environment. They don't know or participate in the environment. And so people who occupy these positions that we occupy don't typically look like us. And I think it's a reflection of the advancement of this country that all people, irrespective of the color of your skin or how much money you have in your pocket, can really do any job that you put your mind to. And so I'm grateful for that. And what I try to do is inspire people as I travel the country by saying, if you work hard, you can achieve your goals, no matter what people are telling you. And they believe it because I look atypical. So there's that power in being able to do that. Whether it's for young girls or whether it's for African American males, it doesn't really matter. You can really harness the difference because there is a difference in this situation. You know, in terms of environmental justice and equity, you know, leadership starts at the top. The president said from day one that every single thing he did would serve as a rising tide for all communities. He's the first president to talk about environmental justice, first sitting president to talk about environmental justice during the State of the Union address. So this is something that is very serious to him and is near and dear to my heart. And so I feel like I can run as fast as I can. We have reorganized our agency and created a national program with 200 people whose job solely is to focus on environmental justice and equity across the board. We have made EJ a part of EPA's DNA.
I like that.
And the staff love it. Yeah. They love it because they're there to protect the planet, but they love it because they know that they're doing it in a way that protects everyone. And so we're a small but mighty organization because of the culture, the beliefs, and what we're trying to do. And it's easier because we're serving a president that believes in it.
And do you believe that that belief system is changing, understanding how important it is to uplift all communities, understanding really the structural challenges environmentally that take decades to undo, you know, and you've only been in this role a brief period in that broader scheme of things?
I believe so. I think that whether I'm in Lowndes County, Alabama, predominantly black county, where you see a disproportionate impact in terms of a lack of water infrastructure, or whether I'm in McDowell County, West Virginia, the heart of Appalachia, where you see the exact same thing happening to a predominantly white community because of their income status. As we have designed our environmental justice and equity programs, we've been very strategic to show whether you're Native American, Hispanic, white, or black, or Asian, any of our cultures, that there are folks who are having a tougher time, and that our environmental laws and investments should create a rising tide for every single person in this country. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to shape that. And I believe that if we reorganize, which we've done, and I believe if we infuse capital at a fast enough rate over these 4 years, it'll be very hard to dial that back. And more people in this country will be better off because of that.
That's well said. That's worth a round of applause. We very much appreciate that. I want to ask one more question on equity and then pivot to innovation. You have jurisdiction over a wide array of different pollutants. Obviously you have communities of color that have been disproportionately impacted environmentally. Can you speak to, when you look at pollution reduction in some of your areas of focus, where you're seeing progress and opportunity?
I feel very thankful that I've come along in a time where there are technological solutions. And, I have been heartened in my conversations with the private sector around pollution control technologies and best management practices that may have not been available in the past. And having these tough conversations with the private sector from day one has helped me realize if we tweak the design of our regulations in a way that's more conducive to innovation, extending a little bit of trust, but on the back end having those verification processes, the private sector can meet the moment. And we're seeing that happen in the automobile, transportation sector. We're even seeing that happen in the petrochemical sector as well. The technologies exist, the business models are there. Quite frankly, we just have to have the will to do right by all people. And I'll be honest with you, we at EPA have decided that we're going to use the power of the media and social media to shine a light on where this isn't happening. And I can guarantee you a lot of it does require action by EPA, but a lot of it is once that light shines on those who are not doing the right thing, somehow, some way, they find the resources to do the right thing. That's what we want them to do.
Right. Well, I think when you look around this room at the innovators, our leading companies, leading technology companies in the Valley, this is part of our ethos. I often talk about a new era of Silicon Valley leadership. Environmental stewardship is a core component of that. And when we talk about technology and the technology that's propelling us, I want to shift to EVs. And maybe we can double click on the school buses.
Yeah.
When you spoke about your experience and the young boy with asthma, can you speak to where you are focused connected to EV deployment and also share updates around the school buses?
Well, I think the reason I love telling the Alma, Kansas story is because we keep hearing from certain groups of people that EVs are not designed for our rural constituency, that EVs aren't designed for moderate to low income. And we know that as this technology evolves and as we design our regulations and as we infuse these tax credits and other things from this historic legislation, that electric vehicles will be available for people all over this country. And so my focus is on the technology, making sure that our regulations accurately capture the ability of these technologies, but doing it in a way where we pay constant attention to cost benefit. We pay constant attention to, if we push on our regulation, will the infrastructure be there? How do we match those things so that all people in this country have access to this new clean transportation economy? I think we try to, at EPA, this EPA, we try to ensure that all of our regulations and all of our policies move as quickly as possible, embracing technology and innovation and demonstrating that you can do good and financially do well at the same time, and you don't have to leave anyone behind. It's a work in progress,
right.
But we're seeing a lot of momentum here, and that goes for our power sector, that goes for our oil and gas sector. I just have some of the best conversations with innovators behind the scenes in some of these supposedly hard industries. And it's leaders like those in this room that are making these conversations easier to have. And I'm thankful for that.
You don't talk like a regulator, which I really like. And maybe on that question of innovation and technology, what are the technologies that are exciting you the most? You know, when you think about climate and where you see the most opportunity.
You know, I was at a CIRA conference in Houston not too long ago, and when you think about the oil and gas sector and you look at this AI technology, you look at these robotic dogs, you look at all of this technology that's going to sniff out these emissions and really help us, you know, look at the data more closely and maximize the reduction of methane in the oil and gas sector. Things like that get me excited. When I'm talking to a rural electric cooperative and they're excited about a yellow school bus because they know during the day it's going to be parked and their membership is going to benefit from a more efficient energy delivery. When I think about the power sector and all these clean technologies that are on the horizon, clean fuels, it's exciting. And you know, a lot of times we think that our farmers are not in the game. You know, the precision agriculture game is so hot right now.
Right.
And when you look at what can be done to more efficiently feed this country, but reduce the amount of pesticide and herbicide and runoff, it's amazing. And so as a regulator, I am very well aware of the power of a regulation. Sure. But if I can match that with the innovation and the brilliance from the people out here in this audience, it's a win-win all day long.
Right. I think that's so well put. Yeah. And you know, I'm very curious listening to you, and I know your bio well, and I'm sure most of the audience do, but can you speak to where this spirit comes from, the spirit to be very focused on innovation and finding solutions that are business positive, yet also benefit all communities?
I think I'm just young enough, you know, the Nintendo, the Atari, you know, technology has always been of interest to me. And what's burned into my brain is the conversations I've had with my parents. And I remember when I first started working at EPA, I was visiting with my parents, and I had a cell phone, I had a BlackBerry. And my dad was saying, it's amazing that you're not in the office on that piece of machinery conducting business all across the country, when just a few years ago, you know, the Army had just given me a beeper.
Right.
And he talked about how powerful that was as a young EPA employee to have a piece of technology that could do work much differently than just 5, 10, 15 years ago. And so as I learned more about the agency, I quickly realized, especially in our air office, we call them regulations. I like to call them technology standards. If we really look at these standards, they are technology standards. They're supposed to endear innovation. They're supposed to create entrepreneurial opportunities. They're just supposed to give some guideposts on how to do it and make sure you protect public health. So if we really embody the true purpose of a water or air regulation, it really is to encourage the latest and greatest technologies, the best data, and make sure that they're equally protective of everyone in this country. I don't see another way to do this job if we don't embrace the private sector and technology. We don't get the job done, which is making sure that if your child has asthma, that they are exposed to the least amount of pollution so that they can go to school, they can learn and be positive, productive citizens in this country. That's really what it's all about.
So how can the technology executives, the leaders in this room, how can we add the most value for you in your role at EPA when you talk about advancing new frontier technologies? Where are the opportunities for partnership that are most valuable from your perspective as administrator?
I think we need to have more conversations. And I believe that I've tried to open up our agency to invite members into the agency and have conversations before we start designing regulations. If you look at...
not after the fact, trying to be proactive.
Not after the fact.
Right.
You know, we love to get your comments, but it's better to be on the design side of the equation. And so if the government could do a better job of having a two-way conversation and then having that bleed into the design of these regulations, the comment period should just be the smoothing over, and we should be coming out with products that are good for business and good for the environment. And so I just try to stay out and about as much as possible. You can't do this job from behind the seat in Washington, D.C. You have to be out, hear the thoughts and ideas of people, and then go back and impart that in the agency. That's the best thing. We have to just have a better relationship.
Well, on the lessons learned relationship, the regulatory standpoint, I'll pick one example, which are power plants, where I know it is a space with layers of challenges. I would love it if you could speak to that example around regulation and lessons learned, and obviously the work and focus connected to power plants.
I can say that when the president first appointed me, I started a conversation with the power sector. And it went something like, instead of dying by 1,000 paper cuts, why not partner with me and let's think about the most pressing regulations that have to come out in the next couple of years. Maybe we expedite some, and then I'll bundle them, not they'll be individual, but we'll bundle the time frame. And then you will be able to assess the economic impact of these 4 or 5 regulations as opposed to guessing over a number of years. What we found out is whether it was a mercury air toxic standard or a 111 rule or something that dealt with effluent guidelines for wastewater, if we put all of these rules on a similar track and then solicited their input, they had an opportunity to help refine all of these rules and maximize the environmental co-benefits while looking at the economic impacts. So fast forward 2.5 years, we've rolled out 5 to 6 rules that I believe really do maximize the environmental opportunity in the power sector, but also has previewed to the power sector where their investments should go if they want to be profitable moving forward. And I think that is forcing the industry to not settle, but to really say, because of long-term investment opportunities, and we know directionally where all these regulations are going, we can make long-term investments. We can make smarter decisions. Mm-hmm. We can really take the plunge and invest in some of these technologies that we know will pay off 5, 6, 7 years down the road. It's about that predictability.
Right. I want to ask one additional question before turning to audience Q&A, because I want to double click on this tech and innovation, and it's maybe a messaging question for you. Put your PR hat on. What I want to ask is what we get wrong with our messaging, but I'll say it a little bit differently. Where do you see the opportunities for us, for our leaders in the room, to do a better job in communicating the positive social impact of our products? Because I think, unfortunately, we've run up against a techlash that is real. Yeah. And I believe you talk about Nintendo and Atari, a lot of things we know and love and appreciate, and how technology has had such a positive influence on your life from a very young age. I think, unfortunately, a lot of that is being lost, that positivity connected to our work, which is genuinely good. In some parts of the country, it just isn't there. Yeah. And in some political factions, it's not there. It's very frustrating for me in my role leading SVLG, but I would love to hear your perspective around where you see opportunities for us to maybe be more effective in sharing the good that is connected to the technology sector.
I think, and I've had this conversation with my predecessor, Lisa Jackson, over at Apple.
Yeah, shout out to Lisa at Apple.
And I just left Kate Brandt over at Google. I think that talking about technology in a way that is accessible to everyone is the trick. I think that the opposition can make technology so foreign or inaccessible, and that's just not true. And so as we think about the role of technology and all of the things that it can do, from efficiency to advantages around education to really helping us be better in the space of environmental justice, I think that there is a narrative around how you connect technology directly to social good and make sure that that socially good message is one that is strong. It's just downright disingenuous to say that our rural communities, because of a lack of broadband, hate technology. They yearn the broadband, but those same individuals that yearn that broadband are looking at $1 million tractors that are probably the most high-tech thing they've seen in a very long time. So dispelling these myths, the accessibility, the active demonstrations, those are the things that I think we all have to do. I'm the administrator of the EPA. Most people don't know who that is. Most people don't believe.
Most people don't know, so you walk down the street like nothing.
Unless there's a crisis. Then everybody knows you.
Well, that's not good. So you're recognized in a crisis. But all right, so you can just walk down the street and no one knows Michael Regan.
Well, in the beginning.
In North Carolina, you can't do that.
Now I am more recognizable.
Okay.
But I think that is because, in all honesty, we've tackled tough problems like the water crisis in Jackson, Mississippi.
Right.
Or the train derailment in East Palestine. I think the president has done some really good things on EJ and the Rose Garden. So the EPA administrator's role has been elevated, but we still have a lot of our population that's just agnostic to how government works. And
so not environmentally agnostic, but just politically policy agnostic.
yeah, when you tell most people the government is here to help, they don't believe that. So I think we have the same problem. How do I, as the administrator, really sell what we're doing to average people? My uncle is in his second career, and he drives a yellow school bus. And I just sat down with him, truthfully, 3 weeks ago. He had no idea that my agency had $5 billion to electrify yellow school buses all across the country. So we have to keep getting after having the right conversations with the right people. I think it's something that plagues all of us.
Well, we've got the right person here, and hopefully this is the right conversation. And
Yes,
we're grateful for that. I'll turn to some Q&A to make sure our audience questions are included here. The first question from the audience, what is EPA's role in making sure there's a level playing field nationally so that we can see growth across the country like here in California? Maybe this is talking about we're fortunate we have a governor who's very forward-looking when it comes to climate, trying to find a level playing field around maybe it's a regulatory question, I'm not sure.
Let me see if I can, I'll take a stab at that, and I'll say, since you started that piece, the governor in California is very progressive around automobiles. And obviously California has the ability through a waiver structure to go further than anyone else. I think my responsibility is to take a look at why California can do what it's doing and try to be as aggressive on a national basis, but also understand that every state, North Dakota, New Mexico, South Carolina, may not have the same infrastructure, the same economics, the same accessibility. And so what we try to do is we try to be as progressive as possible on a nationwide level so that GM feels just as comfortable in California as it does in South Carolina. So we try to keep pace, but there is nothing wrong with respecting the autonomy that states have to be even more entrepreneurial.
And North Carolina progressive looks a little different than California progressive.
Absolutely. Wait a minute. California progressive looks different than every other state. How about that?
All right. So, interesting question here. And we have an audience that you have such great talent in this room. We love this feedback. So the question, environmental issues have fallen into silos. Environmental groups have fallen into silos, each focused on solving just a specific problem. But how can we take a more holistic approach?
That's a very good question. And in my small, tiny piece, what I've done is, thanks to my Deputy Chief of Staff of Outreach and Strategy and Engagement, we bring the big CEOs in every couple of months, force them to sit at the same table and have a holistic conversation with the administrator. And in that conversation, they understand that there's a specific budget, a specific number of people. And so we try to get them to agree amongst themselves what the priority areas should be. And we're also looking for that bang for the buck. How can we work with all of these environmental organizations to achieve all of their goals, but do it in a way sequentially that makes the most sense from an environmental protection standpoint and the priorities of the president? I think that the only way you do it, and this is something that I've done from day one, is bring people to the table and have the hard conversations and let everyone hear everyone and walk out that room with some next steps. You may not agree, but at least you understand and everyone understands what you're working with.
Well, I'll pivot and paraphrase a little bit. It's this a little more personal. But how are you doing in the role? How do you and where do you find balance in your life? Advice that you might have for busy executives trying to find that balance and joy in their everyday. And I'm listening hard.
That's a gotcha question. Yeah. Well, that is working with the assumption that I found that balance.
I assume you have.
I think we all struggle with that, right? And I think we all struggle with that balance. What I'll say is I have tried my best to listen to those who care about me the most and solicit feedback on how well I'm doing with that balance. And
family members
family members,
okay.
Family members and friends. And I think, once you all try this once or twice, you'll realize that, this is a continual feedback loop. Mm-hmm. And there's constant mid-course correction. I'm mission driven, and I think one of the things that I recognize is I only know for sure that President Biden has 4 years. We're hoping for 8. But right now we're working on a 4-year window, so I have to get as much done as possible. And thankfully my family has accepted that sacrifice along with me. Mm-hmm. So if I had to answer that question thinking about it as a career, 8 years, 12 years, well, I would say I'm not doing a very good job. Mm. But because I only have 4 years that I know of, and that we have this awesome opportunity right now to invest $100 billion into our economy, do it in a way that's equitable, drive down the threat from the climate crisis, elevate every single community in this country, I wake up every single day ready to tackle those problems.
So you have the joy, you have the purpose, but finding that balance and that harmony is challenging, it sounds like, which I can certainly understand. I don't even like I think it's a great question, but I don't use the word balance. I talk about harmony. Yeah. Right? Sometimes we might do a very late night call because someone wants to have dinner with their family, right? So you're not on a set schedule. You're not necessarily balancing things, but you're finding harmony within all that you've got going on.
I agree with that answer.
Yeah. I didn't say I'm doing it. Yeah, okay. How can the private sector best leverage our climate efforts as EPA considers new regulations?
I think it's as simple as coming to the table, offering to come to the table as early as possible, and having conversations broader than the 1 or 2 regulations that are hot for the day. I think that we have to be creative and entrepreneurial and thoughtful together. And let me just say, I don't believe that there's anyone at the EPA who believes that we're creating jobs, that we're driving the economy, that we're the most innovative. I think that we understand our role extremely well. And so I think the way that we work the best together is through a partnership, a transparent, continual engagement on how we protect the planet, protect the environment and public health, but create jobs and be economically competitive on a global level. I think we all share that. And I think if that's the North Star, I think we can do a much better job.
Yeah, no, I agree on that. And maybe a follow-up I'd ask more philosophically. If you look at North Carolina, if you look at, the Deep South, I don't know if you call North Carolina the Deep South per se, and then you look at California, where we are here in the coastal states, do you think that there is the same awareness around climate and the work that you're doing? And I'm not saying that, maybe what I'm asking is, do you believe that the appreciation and the urgency to act is now accepted in uniform? Or as you travel throughout the country, are you still out making a case for the work you're doing in the first place?
Right.
Because here it's easy. This audience, we're all behind you and deeply supportive, looking for ways to partner.
Sure. Do
you find that when you're visiting other pockets of the country, particularly rural communities, southern communities?
I do. If the question is what I think it is, which is the people, not the politicians, but the people. When I engage with people all across this country, very few people don't recognize the impacts of climate change. Very few people don't want to embrace technology and clean energy policies, but they are in the grips of certain industries that really are the economic engines of their communities, give the most to their churches, contribute to the museums. So these people want to break the cycle, but it's very difficult to do with some of these industries that are embedded throughout the South and throughout some of the Midwest as well. And then it's not as if we don't have gerrymandering and all kinds of issues with voting. So the current Congress may not reflect the will of the people. And the only way that you find it out is for yourself, and that's to travel and talk and have these conversations. Right. But I can guarantee you the people in Louisiana don't want to be known as the petrochemical community or Cancer Alley. They're looking for solutions. And those petrochemical facilities can embrace some technologies that can reduce that, but they haven't had that pressure. So my answer is yes. People all across this country, young and old, recognize the power of clean energy and clean technology. And there's not a person in this country that is not experiencing wildfire smoke or a flood in their basement or a hurricane or a tornado ripping through their communities. Everybody is, you don't have to believe a scientist. You look out your window. People are experiencing this. We have to remove this grip that certain industries have on our communities and on our political system.
That's well said. That's well said. Well, Administrator, just a couple more questions, and you've been so gracious, and thank you, audience members, for the questions you submitted. I want to give you the floor to speak about maybe two things. One, if there are any other programs or key initiatives that we haven't touched on that you want to make sure that our leaders in the audience are aware of. And then maybe secondly, just out of those initiatives that you're working on, where your real target and priority focus is over the next 12 months.
Yeah, well, thank you for that, and thank you all. This is just great to be able to have these conversations because they're so important. And I think that you studied very well and asked all the right questions. And so there may be a few that I want to double down on, and that is this notion that I know that I cannot do my job effectively without you all. And I have a 9-year-old son that I'm very proud of, and I want him to live in a country that is competitive, that has job opportunities, is known for its technology, but is safe and has breathable air and clean water. And I think that as long as we understand that we have to work together to achieve those goals, we can achieve those goals. I'd like to double down on this $27 billion greenhouse gas reduction fund. This is an honest effort by the agency to design a program where we look at maximizing investment in low carbon technologies that really will win the future. And we know that if we do it right, and if we have the right partners, that we can leverage trillions of dollars at some point out there to turn this economy around, create a lot of jobs, more importantly, protect this planet and my 9-year-old son, Matthew. So I believe that we can do this together. Yellow school buses, $27 billion in the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, $3 billion for environmental justice and equity. These are all things that everyone should be for. And I recognize that there are some politicians that say they're not for this in DC, but when you see these investments happening in their districts, it's a different story at home. So we have to keep hope and recognize that even though North Carolina and California are not exactly the same culturally, I guarantee you that the majority of people in both states want everything that I just laid out.
Yeah. Well, I fully agree with that. And the last question I want to ask you is about being effective in building consensus. And again, we've been honored to have you here, Administrator. You've been so effective in your role. The question is about, and don't give any secrets if you don't want to give them out, but what have been the secrets to you being effective in building consensus and being a strong communicator? And then maybe if you just share what are some of the lessons you've learned coming from, obviously, an important role in North Carolina, but leaving to run the EPA is quite a big jump. Lessons that you might have learned as you reflect on your tenure to date, those key lessons and nuggets.
I think the key lessons are, you don't get everything you want. So you have to be consensus focused, and everyone deserves a seat at the table, even those who are going to disagree with you. And I learned that in North Carolina. And I think that we did some amazing things in North Carolina because I was willing to sit down and trade ideas and really believe that the best idea can win. Our politics are so divisive, the way we operate doesn't have to be. And I think that I was lucky enough to work for a governor who believed in building consensus. And as you all saw with President Biden in the debt ceiling, I think you saw a president who said, I am not going to get everything I want, but I'm going to get what the people of America need. And so there were some conversations that ensued that a lot of people on the fringe ends didn't really agree with, but he stayed focused. Well, it's a privilege to work for a president like that because that style is on full display during a debt ceiling debate, but that's on full display for those of us who work for him every day. And so it helps me in this role. I know, again, absent the industries that I regulate, if we can't come to a consensus, everything will just end up in court. Everything sometimes will end up in court anyway, but at least you have less things that are litigated against. So I believe in consensus building. I believe in hearing people out. I believe in meeting people where they are. And I believe that at the end of the day, that if we're all strong in our convictions, the best ideas can win, and that's best for the country.
Wow, that is how you close out what I hope has been a very informative and productive discussion. Certainly we are so deeply grateful, Administrator, for having you join us, and let's give it up for Administrator Regan.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, man.
Yeah,
I
it's
love
great
that.
to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too.
Yeah.